So I want to start out slowly but surely and set out the appropriate thing with a disclaimer. I am a non-lawyer spokesperson. Okay, I'm not a lawyer. A little bit of background. I'm on my 4th career. I've tried to retire 3 times. None of it has stuck. I was in the international travel business. I was a director level sales and marketing executive for over 20 years. I transitioned from that into academia, so I became an adjunct professor of communication. Excuse me, and I'm going to apologize for my allergies today. I'm an adjunct professor of communication at a local university in Southeast Florida. And then I decided that that wasn't something I wanted to do permanently or full-time, so I transitioned from that and became a sales training manager for a regional organization that covered about 4 southeastern states. And in 2007, when that organization declared bankruptcy as the economy went totally down the toilet, I said, oh good, I'm going to retire now. And that lasted about a month. And I thought, I'm going to go crazy. So that's when I started my own business. So I started my own consulting practice in 2008. And I found it really interesting. Everybody wants to ask me, what does QSTS stand for? It actually doesn't stand for anything. When I first started my consulting business, it stood for, go figure, Quick Start Training Solutions. So I think it's only appropriate that I'm on the Quick Start track today. But my training programs were typically focused, and still are to some degree, on mid-level management training and coaching programs. So as I started into the professional services consulting and business development, that didn't really talk to what I did anymore. Number one, I didn't want to change my cards. I had a lot of cards out there. People knew my logo with the big Q on it. And so I thought, okay, well, what can I do? So QSTSinc.com was available. And so now people ask me, what does it stand for? And I had to come up with an anagram that started with a Q. And you know, that's not easy. Anybody play Scrabble in here? It's not really easy. So the best I could come up with was Quit Seeking Temporary Solutions. Okay. You know, it really doesn't stand for anything. So before we get started, some of you, did anybody answer the survey that went out about a month or so ago? Phil, thank you for that. So before we get started, I like to give people what they want, and this is going to be interactive because I know you just had 3 cookies and no coffee. So what are some of the things that are challenging you in communications? Nothing? Good, we're done. Okay. Pardon me? A responsiveness. Okay, that's not just attorneys, I might say. Okay, anything else? Anything else? Yes.
Making it a priority.
Okay. Making communication as a whole a priority. Okay. Anything else? I'm not promising that we're going to answer all of these, mind you, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. Yes.
Identifying the right form of communication.
Okay, the right form, or what we call in the academic field, the right media to use. Okay, anything else?
Communicating with attorneys in a way that pitching ideas to them that will be persuasive to them, especially when a lot of them see it as, oh, you're new, or you've only been here a couple of years. We've been here for 20 years.
Speaking their language.
You know, speaking
okay.
their language and
being persuasive. Okay. Anything else?
Making the communication client-centric.
Okay.
It's not about you or the firm, but it's about clients.
Okay. That's enough. Okay. So we're gonna try and hit on some of this stuff. Maybe not all of it, but hopefully you are going to be, in fact, going to be able to take away with some stuff. I actually was up on that podium before everybody came in here, and I'm like, this is not someplace I want to be. All right, so that's why I'm down here, and I'm going to walk around and pick on people indiscriminately. So, you know, one of the biggest challenges today is learning, is communicating. How many of you would consider yourselves millennials? I know who you are because you're on your phones all the time, right? You know, you're texting, you're using social media, you're emailing, what you're typically not doing is getting in other people's faces, although marketers are a unique breed. So let's just talk a little bit, because this is typically how I like to set things out when I'm speaking to attorneys or accountants or engineers, other professional service providers who are not used to being people, right? They're not like us. We're people. So my model of business development is threefold. There's visibility, there's relationships, and there's expertise. And the interesting thing about communication is it is across all of these things because it's all founded in communication. Just depends on how you're going to communicate. So a visibility piece is what I do. So part of my marketing plan for myself is to increase my visibility is to speak in front of groups, do workshops, speak at bar associations, CPA associations, so forth. That's part of my visibility. But I still have to actually say something to you that's going to help you in order for you to listen to me. Relationships are another thing. If anybody has been, just David talked a few minutes ago, right before lunch, about building relationships and networks. That's a huge part of a marketing or a business development plan. And then there's the expertise. So there's a track, I think, that's talking about content marketing and this kind of thing. That's a place to exhibit expertise, your attorney's expertise. So one of the other things I try to get attorneys, especially, and accountants, to understand is that every one of them is in business for him or herself. Whether you're with a large firm, a mid-sized firm, a small firm, the solos get it, okay? But I don't see too many solos in here, okay? But it doesn't matter. This is something that nobody learns in school. How many of you have graduated from college? Okay, I'm not here to embarrass anybody. All right, how many of you who have graduated from college learned how to do business development and, while you were in college? Seriously. No, we were all kind of like thrown out there and said, good luck with that, right? So it's no different for attorneys or accountants. So attorneys come out of law school, they know the law, they have the expertise. But what they don't have is an understanding of what it means, why they need to do business development. So here's hopefully something you can take back that will help them understand that. Number one, they're in business for themselves. Because most lawyers today do not stay with their firms for the rest of their lives. When you're building relationships and you're building your client base, when you leave, you get to take most of those clients with you eventually. And even if you don't get to take them with you, if you built good relationships with them, they're going to follow you, right? So why do we need it? Most attorneys don't understand a sales cycle. There's a lot of Sandler sales training, how to close the deal, blah, blah, blah. But we need to go back to understand why you need to engage in business development in the first place. Okay? There's what we call client referral attrition, client attrition. They fall out of love with us. They find somebody else. They break our hearts, okay? Or they die. I mean, either literally or figuratively. So businesses go out of business. Individuals do die. Anybody here? I mean, I would prefer not to, but I'm not unique. I'm going to do it too. In addition, we have to start looking at memory, right? About people's memory. And if they don't know who you are, or if they don't remember meeting you, or if they don't remember what you do, they can't refer you or use you, right? So you need to be in front of them all the time. So those are the big question marks. And then every client or source of referral has what we call a perception of value. And let's be honest, lawyers are high ticket items. When I hire a lawyer, honestly, to me it's like buying a Bentley. And so what happens is that most attorneys don't understand that the higher your cost, the slower your sales cycle is in general. Okay, especially when you're bringing in new clients. So that's why it's important to help attorneys understand this, Now, this doesn't exactly relate to communication, but I always like to start all of my stuff out with this so that everybody can understand why learning all of this kind of stuff is important, okay? So let's talk a little bit about communication. What we're going to talk about today, and I forgot to turn my timer on, sorry. So you're already late. You're already going to get out of here late. Okay, so we're going to talk about cultural awareness. We're going to talk about body language. And we're going to talk about how to speak your client's language, right? And then we'll if we have time, we're going to get to some of these things when we're done in the question and answer. By the way, I'm very, yes?
When you refer to clients, are we referring to our internal partners as our clients, or are we talking about external?
We can use both, okay? Because aren't they, you know, you have your clients in general are your attorneys, but then they have clients, because after all, how many of your participation in this conference is being paid for by your firm? Okay, so do they just want you to get better at handling their attorneys? No, seriously, is that what you're here for? Or are they hoping that they're going to get a bigger return on their investment in sending you here by having you be able to go back and say, do this, let me sprinkle you with holy water, because I've learned it at the annual conference, and you're now all great marketing people. Okay, so we're talking both. So what is culture? Anybody can anybody give me a definition of culture? Can anybody tell me what your culture is? Pardon? How a certain group of people acts, believes. How many of you deal in what we would consider what you would consider a multicultural environment? You have attorneys or other people in your firm from different cultures. Okay, do you deal with clients from different cultures? Okay, so here's what culture is. It's a unique set of language, behaviors, values, and what we learn culture. So we learn culture when we're growing up, and every culture has a unique set, and at the foundation of it, there are rules for communication, both verbally and non-verbally. So the reality is that we need, okay, so there's two different cultures. Where do you think these cyclists are cycling? What country? In the United States. What about these cyclists down here? That's from India. Okay, so do you see, just as something as simple as bike riders, how we express the unique culture that we grow up in? And one of the biggest challenges is, why do we need it? So what, right? So what? Why do you think you need to know anything about another culture? Aren't we the best? The reality is that we are a multicultural country, number one. I happen to be based in South Florida, which is one of the most multiculturally diverse areas anywhere in the country. There are other areas that have huge different cultural population, but it's not quite as diverse as it is in South Florida. So we're in a multicultural country, plus increasing globalizations. You know, what are you reading in the law news? You know, this one's merging with a Chinese firm, and that one's opening an office in Turkey, right? So this increasing globalization makes it really, really important for us to understand how other people communicate. Because when you miscommunicate, that's when the problems start, okay? So what is it? Really, cultural awareness is understanding, right? It's understanding. It's acceptance of others' ways of behavior. It doesn't have to you don't have to like it necessarily, but you do have to accept that there are different ways that people communicate. So let's talk a little bit about what you need to know. All of us belong to multiple cultures, okay? Because if I said to you, what are you? So can I pick on somebody close by here? So let's look at Suzanne. Okay, Suzanne, could you tell me what are you? Culturally, what are you? Okay, you're French. Scottish. You're Catholic. That's fine. That's okay. I'm Catholic too, you know, such as it is. Okay.
What else is there?
Can you give me an age range? Okay. Less than or equal to 50. Okay. Okay. Are you married? Okay. Do you have children? Grandchildren?
No.
Okay. What are you compared to the other people in this room? Do you see people who are different than you in this room? Okay, you're white. Okay. You're female. So do you start to see how we are all members of subcultures? Because every one of these cultures teaches us certain rules. So as Catholics, we don't have the same beliefs, for example, that Hindus do. Okay, we have similar beliefs to Jews, to the Jewish religion. We have similar beliefs to Protestant religions, although they're certainly not exactly the same. Okay, our approaches are different. Our age has a lot to do with cultural differences. I mean, I was the last person in the world to get the internet. When I first got my home computer, I don't know, in the 90s, and my son works for PwC in IT, go figure. And he's like, oh, Mom, we're going to get you connected to the internet. I'm like, oh, no, I don't want anybody stealing my stuff. I don't know what stuff I thought I was going to have. Now we're handing it to them, right? Now here, you want my bank account information? No problem. Here it is. Okay, hey, you want to know I'm in San Diego so you can go in and rob my house? Here's my Facebook posting. Okay, so that really impacts how we learn to communicate. The fact that we're married or not married. How long have you been married, if you don't mind my asking? 2 years? Oh, never mind. Has anybody been married a long time? Over 30 years? Anybody been married 30 years or longer? No? Okay, 25 years or longer? Okay, so the reality is that is a culture, isn't it? Because don't you typically interact with other married couples? Okay, so I happen to be widowed. I lost my husband in 2004, and yes, it was awful and terrible. I had been with my husband for 32 years. I was like dropped onto the Mars or something. I thought, A, there are no single people over the age of 50 left on the face of the earth, and B, if there are those people, I don't know who they are, because I have been living as a couple for the majority of my adult life. So this is part of a culture, right? If you have children, that's a different part of a culture, because you're not sitting there talking to your single girlfriends about formula, right? I have a 6-year-old grandson, and I invited some friends. My kids were down to visit me. I invited a young couple that have 2 little kids around my grandson's age, and we're sitting around, and my daughter-in-law and this girl were sitting there talking about kid stuff, school stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is so boring. Well, it wasn't boring when my son was 6. Okay, our race is absolutely has a bearing on our culture, and this does too. So does our gender. Because what it does is it teaches us how to communicate, right? So it's ethnicity, it's age, it's gender, it's religion, it's nationality. And cultures have different ways of expressing understanding, how we understand each other, emotion, which is really a big one, recognition, respect, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about nonverbal cultural differences. So in general, if someone is really embedded in a different culture, we typically can see that by the way they dress. Anybody ever travel to Europe? Okay, I used to travel to Europe a lot, and I did a training on cruise ships in Europe and so forth. And it was so interesting to me that I didn't even have to open my mouth, and somebody would come up to me and say, hey, you're an American, aren't you? I'm like, how do you know that? And I started asking them, how did they know it? They knew it a couple of ways: my haircut, my shoes, and my purse. So we don't even recognize, right? We're not looking at other people, looking at their purses and saying, oh, where did she get that? Is she American? But we kind of know, because we're Americans, we kind of know that we all kind of dress not all that dissimilar. Another thing is body movement. So typically, how do Americans move? Pardon? Quickly, with a purpose, right? So we're like, okay, I got to get to that door, right? How do Italians move? Oh, buongiorno, and they stop, and I mean, if they're supposed to be someplace, and they run into people they know, they're 2 hours late. Okay, posture is another thing. Typically, Americans often stand very, very tall, very straight. But there are cultures where making yourself smaller is a sign of respect to others. So, do I have any Japanese? Okay, okay, okay. So, what is the typical when you meet someone who is of a higher status than you are, a boss or whatever? What is the typical way that you greet them? You bow. And the further in status they are, the higher they are from you, the deeper you bow. Okay, what is that doing? It's making yourself smaller. Okay, now for an American to do that, we're like, I'm not bowing to you, right? Because after all, aren't we equal? Okay, gestures are another thing, and I'm not going to go through all of these because we're never going to run out of time. Anybody from Brazil in here? Okay, I'm here to tell you, what does this mean in the United States? Okay, anybody know what it means in Brazil? You don't want to know you can go Google this tonight. All right, so there's your homework, or you can Google it now, and then I'll hear everybody go, ah! Okay, but you don't want to use this gesture in Brazil. Facial expressions are another. So in general, Asian peoples typically mask their emotions much more than Latins, okay, or those of Mediterranean cultures. They're usually very, very facially expressive. Asians typically are not. They are taught to mask their expressions. Eye contact is a huge difference, a huge difference. What do you think if somebody doesn't look you in the eye, Cynthia? What do you think about them?
They're ignoring me.
They're ignoring you? What else?
They're not listening.
They're not listening. They're lying. Right? Because after all, were you raised in the United States? Okay, when you were a little girl and the cookie jar was broken and your mother was trying to figure out who did it, and she's got you in the crosshairs, and she's doing this to you and fussing at you and giving you what for, and you're looking everywhere. You're looking for the dog, you're looking for your brother. What did your mother say to you? You look at me when I'm talking to you. Right? So this is how we learn to use eye contact as a sign of respect. Do I have anyone who was raised in Haiti in this room? Okay, and I'll use Haitians as an example because in this particular instance, their culture is more like the Asian cultures than they are like the Western cultures. And one of the reasons I know this is because we have a huge Haitian population in South Florida. And our local grocery store chain, well, it's regional, it's a huge chain, was having a real issue with all of the Haitians that they were hiring to staff as checkouts and so forth. They weren't looking people, not only were they not looking at us in the eye, they wouldn't even talk to us. And their branding, Publix branding, is where shopping is a pleasure. Well, for those of us who got to know our checkout person by name, and we would wait in that person's line because we had been going there for so long, to have someone not look us in the eye and not even to acknowledge we were there, it wasn't so much of a pleasure. So they had to go through a huge, what would they call, an enculturation program. It took them years to help their Haitian staff understand what was expected in America when it came to that. Because in their culture, when their mother was fussing, and if you don't mind if I point at you, I'll use you as an example, okay? If in the Haitian culture, when mom was fussing at you and you were staring at her, what she said to you was, don't you look at me when I'm talking to you. So do you see how just that simple thing about eye contact can start all sorts of misconceptions about what's going on in someone else's life. Touch is another thing. There are some cultures which are very touchy. There are others that are not touchy at all. The United States kind of falls a little bit in between. It depends on your family background, typically, whether you touch or not. Personal space is a huge one, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute. So I'm going to use an example, okay, of one of these subcultures to show you how we learn to communicate differently. So this is interactive. The reason I picked male and female speaking, and it was interesting, I was next door listening to a couple of panels this morning, and the issue of gender, especially in law firms, came up. And so I thought that's kind of interesting. But the reason I use this is because every one of us in here at some point in our life has or will have to interact with someone of the other gender, right? Okay, so for the first part of this, I just thank you for having men in this room, because I was going to have to like make a whole table of females, men, if that didn't happen. So we're going to take two games that kids play, baseball and Barbie. So I only want the men in this room, the guys in this room, to answer the following questions about baseball. How long does a game of baseball last? 9 innings? Well, what if you're having a good time and you want to keep playing? Can you do that? Yeah, you can? How many of you say yes, or how many say no? It's 9 innings. If somebody is winning at the end of 9 innings, you just can't say, you know what, we're having such a good time here, let's keep playing, right? 9 innings, okay? How many people play on a team, can play on the baseball field for each team? Apparently I don't have none of you guys know baseball. 9 players. Okay, so if somebody, let's pretend it's a little league, right? And so if you're going out for little league and one little kid says, I don't want to play today, I'm going home, can you still play the game? No, not really. Okay, you can't do that in Major League either. What happens if you get somebody who says, I want to play, and there's 9 people on the field and he runs on the field? Can he play? No. Okay, so it's 9 players. Now, what's the point of baseball? No, I didn't ask for the women. I just want the men. Okay? You can tell you're hanging around men too much. Okay, what's the point of baseball, guys? Win. To win. And how do you do that? Yes. Okay. Any guys? How do you win? Okay, you have to score and then you win, right? Okay. Now, on the team, okay, when you have a team of baseball players, is there one guy that the other players on the team elect or whatever that's looked up with more respect than the others? You don't know? The captain, okay, yes. So the other players get together and they elect the captain. And is it better to be the captain or the kid that goes and grabs the sweaty towels off the field? It's better to be the captain. Okay, that's fine. I'm just questioning. Okay, now ladies, we're going to play Barbie. And this is also a pet peeve of mine, is calling everybody guys. It's socially acceptable today, but I don't like it because the majority of the people in this room are not guys. Okay, you're women. All right, oops. So, ladies, how long does a game of Barbie last? Forever. However long you want. Okay. How many players can play at a game of Barbie? Unlimited. Okay. Can you play Barbie alone? Yeah. Okay. So what is the point of Barbie? What do we, other than marrying Ken? Okay. What is the point of Barbie? Who's the best Barbie? There is no best Barbie. Okay? There is no best Barbie. So what happens when we learn to speak this language, when we learn the rules of being male or female in our society, okay, so I'm talking about our society, and I am generalizing, yes, because you're going to say, oh, well, I didn't do that. Okay, but we have to generalize in order to see the pattern. So, what happens here is that boys learn that there is a process and a point to communicating, right? They also learn another thing. when you have your little kid, your little boy, who, and anybody can answer this, when you have your little boy who you've practiced and practiced and practiced before he goes out to try out for Little League, and let's pretend that, I don't know, let's see, you bet red, let's pretend that the left field player is the most important, okay, because he's the one who's going to save all those runs. So you practice and practice and practice, and he goes out and he comes home and you say, "What's wrong, Bobby?" "Oh, the coach, he made me a shortstop or second base or right field. He put me in right field." What do we tell that kid? You go to the coach and you tell him you're really good at left field because we've been practicing, don't you? Don't you prompt your boys to stand up for themselves and to promote themselves? Yes, we do. Okay. In general, we do. Things are changing a little bit now. Okay. But in general, we promote our boys to speak up for themselves. Don't be a crybaby, right? Don't be a crybaby. You can do it, right? Now, what happens with women is, what do we call the girl who's playing Barbie with us, who's like, "Oh, my Barbie's the best, and she's got the best clothes, and she's got Gucci shoes"? What do we call her? A spoiled brat. Oh, she's so into herself. Okay. Now, what happens is that we learn in our gender, typically females don't speak up for yourself. Because what that does is it causes your group to put you down. Okay? So what this results in is what I call men and women talk. Men develop a worldview, in general, of the world as a ladder. Okay? You're either one up or you're one down from somebody, and is it better to be one down or one up, guys? It's better to be one up. Okay? Women develop a worldview of the world as a web of connections. Where is up on this web? There is no up. Okay? So what happens is that very often what we see in the workplace is a challenge communicating with the other gender because we're communicating from different perspectives. This is what causes a lot of challenges, especially in the workplace. But I'm here to say, guys, if you don't ever learn to speak female, you will never have a successful personal relationship with a woman. And women, if you don't learn to speak male, at least a little bit of male, you're never going to be successful in the workplace because the workplace is still a masculine form of communication. So that's that. So here's some things about cultural awareness. The two biggest things are you need to look and you need to listen. So you need to watch for cues that other people are giving you in order to modify your communication behavior. Because after all, what do we want from a communication? What do we want the other person to do? We want them to understand us. Okay, so this is one thing you can take back to your attorney clients, okay, which speaks to what somebody asked over here. How do you get your attorneys to understand it's about the other person, not about them? Okay, because the point is it's not to show off. Well, there are a lot of people who use communication to show off, but it's not about showing off your area of expertise. It's about getting other people to understand you. Because that's what effective communication is being understood. And so the smart communicators are ones who can adjust their communication style to match the people who are listening to them. Okay? And I give you some things to take back and look at. So let's talk about nonverbal communication. We're going to talk about reading the signs, body language, cultural differences. What's going on here? Tell me a story about this. She's upset with him. You don't think he just asked her to marry him? Or if he did, do you think she's going to accept? Okay, why do you think that? She's turned away. Her body language, her facial expression. Okay, what's going on here? They're gossiping. They see somebody, oh, didn't she look in a mirror before she came out of the house? What about this? So mom is nagging him. Okay, so I'm going to just give you, is there a laser on here? Probably not. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a hint. How many of you have teenagers or have had teenagers? Ugh, and don't you love that eyes roll back in their head? There are very few what we call universal nonverbal signals that every culture uses. This is one of them. It is the universal sign of contempt. So the eyes rolled off to the side, especially with this. Whatever. Okay, this is why it's so annoying to to us parents. What's going on here? Pardon? So they lost the game, and is the coach yelling at this guy because he lost it? What is the coach doing? How do you know? His hand's on his back. He's leaned in close, right? Okay. And what about this? He's proposing and she's accepting because the way he proposed was to take her shopping. Okay. Forget the engagement ring. He just took her down Madison Avenue into every shop in New York. Okay. We're much better at reading nonverbal signs than most of us give ourselves credit for. Here's the reality. If this ever does it. Only 7% of what we communicate comes out of our mouth. 93% of what we communicate is nonverbal. So what would you have thought about the excitement of this afternoon if I walked in here and said, hi, I'm going to talk to you about communication. We're going to have so much fun. So just tell me if you have any questions. Y'all would have been, you would have had your phones out so fast it would have made my head swim. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about it. We talked about physical appearance because how you present yourself says a lot. How long does it take you to make a first impression of somebody? Anybody have an idea? How long? Yeah, between 7 and 10 seconds. 7 and 10 seconds. Somebody says, don't you go anywhere without makeup? I said, yeah, I go to the gym when I make the sign of the cross and said, please don't let me get stopped by a cop. Okay, but that's it. Because I never know when I might run into somebody who's my client. Body movement is another thing. You know, how we move, how we stand. Touch is another one. So here's just something that in our culture, may I touch you? Okay, because as a teacher, as an adjunct professor of communication, I have to ask my students if I can touch them because of all sorts of sexual harassment stuff. Okay, but in our culture, to touch someone is a sign that I have the power. The one who touches is the powerful person. The one who is touched is the non-powerful person. Facial expression is another thing. Do you smile? Women typically smile more than men do. Okay. I smile because I'm happy, not because I'm a woman. Eye contact, which we talked about. Vocal cues are another thing. Our vocal cues are how high-pitched or low-pitched our voice is. And very often what women, especially with women, the lower, and especially with leaders generally, the lower the voice pitch, the more powerful you're seen to be. Okay? Space and distance. So if I come, this is one of the reasons teachers stand up when they teach, is because they're claiming their territory. Okay? And they're elevating themselves, which means that they're more powerful. So I'm just giving you a few little things here about some of the things, and understand none of these behaviors taken by themselves prove just because your legs are crossed and your foot is kicking or you're drumming your fingers, that's not the only thing. It's the body as a whole that we notice. Okay, territorial, I just talked about this, leaning against or touching something or elevating yourself. It shows that you're claiming your territory. Defensiveness, everybody talks about crossing your arms as defensive, but it's how you cross your arms. So if I'm standing here like this, my arms are crossed, do I look defensive to you? No, I look cold, right? But if I stand like this, you see the difference? So the facial expression, the posture, so you typically have to look at all of it. Suspicion, in our culture, not maintaining eye contact. If somebody starts moving away from you, you can pretty much rest assured that that person doesn't trust you. Nervousness, you know, frustration, that's our kids. You know, please take out the garbage. Again? How many times do I have to take out the garbage in a week? Okay. Now, some of the nonverbal cultural differences that are the most challenging are time differences. So I know I have someone from Central America, right? Panama, okay. So TikTok, you know, well, you were on time. Not only were you on time, you were early, because apparently you've enculturated yourself into the American expectation of time. Okay, do all of your meetings start on time in Panama? Okay, and again, there's reasons for it because they see time differently than we do. Personal space. Anybody ever been to Europe? Okay, these people have no concept of a line, right? I mean, they're just like all over you. You're like, I don't know what's here first. You know, well, who's first? You can't tell. Eye contact we talked about. Okay, now I just want to finish up because I am going to be running a few minutes late. Why to speak client? Okay, now this is for your attorneys. So this is something you can take back to your attorneys. So the fact is that you need to learn how the client speaks. So if you're dealing with your internal clients, you need to learn how they speak. If your attorneys are dealing with clients or sources of referrals who are not attorneys, they need to learn how to speak client. Because here's a reason. Poor guy, it's my fault, Your Honor. I told my client I'd argue the slippery slope. So obviously this client is used to, I don't know, water parks. Okay, so here's how to speak client. Just as we've been talking about cultural differences across countries and areas of the world, specific industries and organizations have their specific culture because they're a social system. So every industry and every organization has its own culture, okay? That means it has its own values, behaviors, and most important, language, okay? So most of you are from different firms. You don't have the same culture. Mid-sized firms do not probably have the same culture as the gigantic ones, right? The AmLaw 100. So the language is different. Individuals also have their own culture, which is their values, their behaviors, and their language. So how do you learn, or how do you teach your attorneys how to learn how to speak to their client, whether it's writing for them, whether it's standing up and speaking to them, whether it's talking to them one-on-one? You need to start reading everything you can about that specific industry or about that specific organization. Because only by doing that are you going to start to learn the language. So you want to make sure that that client in that industry, let's just say that, let's say that you're